Hey folks, Judd Zolgad, Phil Mackey here, reacting real quick, 1500ESPN.com. Draft night, first round pick for the Vikings. At least what we think is going to be their lone first round pick at this point as we shoot this is done, Phil. Anthony Barr, linebacker, UCLA is the choice. You were firmly on the Manziel bandwagon by the time this draft started, but interesting, Johnny Manziel keeps falling and falling. Your initial thoughts on Anthony Barr, because there's been a lot of criticism in the Twitter world and social media certainly about this pick.
Yeah, to clarify the Manziel stance, I would say I'm perfectly comfortable admitting I have no idea if Johnny Manziel is going to pan out in the NFL. I do know that he would have been a lot of fun to watch. Mm-hmm. So if you're just going based off of does he give the Vikings the best chance to win, I maybe not. Who knows? Maybe he wouldn't have even played for a year. Who knows what he would have been like on the field. But it would have been super fun to watch him on the field. I think you and I both suspected all along that the Vikings were going to trade back like they did and then draft a defensive player, either a cornerback or a linebacker, like they did. I'm a little surprised, and maybe it's just because we've been fed all this Johnny Manziel propaganda,
sure,
that a quarterback-starved team didn't want to give up more to move up and change spots with the Vikings. Now, Rick Spielman did say he had offers to move back down, but they didn't want to lose out on Anthony Barr.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as just putting the Johnny Manziel conversation to bed, it's obvious they didn't feel that confident that he could be the quarterback of the future. That whether the number was, I think I was saying earlier that you have to be about 80 or 90% sure if you're going to draft a quarterback that high. If not, take a defensive player. So obviously they and a lot of other teams weren't quite sure on Johnny Manziel.
The interesting dynamic about Manziel is he's such a media celebrity type that the feeling among fans and media, I think the opinion of him is, potential superstar on and off the field. But you can clearly see as he's fallen through this draft that the feeling of National Football League executives, Phil, is much different than certainly the Vikings were,
yeah,
or as you said, there's a lot of teams out there that could have used a quarterback and didn't take one. Now, Anthony Barr, here's the thing. I don't see myself as a Viking homer by any means, but this draft pick, to me, people are jumping on it. And yes, it's a raw player. He's a good athlete. But for some reason, I think people are trying to figure out how he's going to fit into the Vikings defense. And I would caution you with this. You have no idea what Mike Zimmer's defense is going to be. It's not going to be the Tampa 2. So we're trying to project him at linebacker as we've known linebacker for the last 6 or 7 years. That's not how this is going to work. So, and the other thing, too, is if you're going to criticize Spielman for this pick, Phil, Mike Zimmer has to go right along with him. There is no way that Rick Spielman looked at his new head coach and said, I'm taking Anthony Barr, and it's too bad, and you're going to have to make him fit. Mike Zimmer and his defensive staff pushed for this draft pick. So if you're going to go after Spielman, go after Mike Zimmer, too.
Yeah, and I don't think it's so early to criticize anything here. I mean, I was interacting with some people in our live hangout on the website and on Twitter, people just like you kind of suggesting that, there's blame to be thrown around here that the Vikings reached for a linebacker. Well, reached according to what? The mock drafts you see on ESPN.com, right, the mock draft you saw Mike Mayock put out, which I think had the Cardinals taking Anthony Barr at 20th overall. Well, those mock drafts aren't necessarily a direct reflection of what all 32 teams have on their draft board. So unless you have access to all the draft boards in the NFL, now if 25 of the draft boards had Anthony Barr as a late first-round pick, well, maybe there's an argument. But if the Vikings looked at Anthony Barr and said, this is the best linebacker after you get outside the top 5.
Right.
And if Mike Zimmer said Anthony Barr fits exactly what I want in my scheme, I have a hard time criticizing Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer, who clearly have gone up and down the film and clearly know what Mike Zimmer's system is going to look like. When we have now, if this was Leslie Frazier's system, I think we could feel more comfortable maybe nitpicking and picking this apart. But we haven't seen what Mike Zimmer's system is going to be yet.
And the one thing that, because the Vikings used as their base defense, Phil, Tampa 2, we're so used to a 4-3. Mike Zimmer, a good defense in 2014, you don't run just a 4-3. You don't run just a Tampa 2.
Yep.
You run 2 down linemen at times, 3 down linemen, 4 down. So the key thing here is not only do we not know the scheme, but the scheme is going to change. So if you perceive Anthony Barr as a freak athlete, just a great athlete, then it could work out fine. It's so early to look at a pick and say, well, they should have done this or done that. Personally, I thought cornerback was a position of need. I still do. There were some good corners out there. But to jump on this pick just solely based on the fact that, man, it's a raw player, and that's just silly.
Yeah, and he made it clear, too, Mike Zimmer, that the word raw might apply, but that doesn't mean he's a bad football player right now, that they feel comfortable putting him out there. Now, we don't know if he's going to be getting starter reps or not. I do think part of the angst for Vikings fans is we've heard so much about not reaching for a quarterback like they did in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Vikings fans can live with not reaching for a quarterback if they didn't feel like they had a high first-round grade on Johnny Manziel or Teddy Bridgewater.
Right.
But now they feel like the Vikings reached on another position. So I think that's part of the angst.
And the problem is we don't know that.
Right.
We all want to make that assumption, but we don't know that. All right. Anthony Barr is the Vikings' first-round pick, first round of the NFL draft on Thursday. We will be on 9 a.m. Friday morning, Mackey and Judd. We'll be back tomorrow night starting at, 5:30, 6 o'clock or so for more draft coverage.
Yeah. And if you're waiting around till Monday, if you're watching this,
over the place.
we are. If you're watching this over the weekend, on Monday, we will go back and look at, speaking of draft grades and reaching, we'll go back and look at some historic draft grades from years past to see how close those drafts really came to being graded properly.
2005 got an A. Troy Williamson, Mackey, Judd, 1500 ESPN. Thanks for coming to the website. Shut her off, Phil.